Ladies and gentlemen, let us start. Lord Cameron still extremely popular, and he's back. So, Excellencies, climate change is stealing the food of Africa's table. Let me repeat that. Climate change is stealing the food of Africa's table. Africa is ground zero of the climate breakdown. But for the leaders in the global north, Prime Minister Ruto, Akinwumi, Lord Cameron, what happens in Africa will not stay in Africa. All of us can win if we invest in Africa. 2 years ago in Glasgow, and also welcome Fiji, Africa put the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program on the table, the AAAP. And again, just to recall, it is the world's single largest adaptation program on the table, Africa-led, Africa-owned. And now, 2 years later, AAAP is delivering. Nearly $7 billion of investments already shaped, 150 million Africans more climate resilient, 630,000 new jobs created, President Adesina, thanks to you. More than half of the countries in Africa are participating. 2 short years. A lot achieved, but so much to be done. Look around this room. Bill Gates, Prime Minister Ruto, President Adesina, Lord Cameron, Akinwumi, and on and on and on. This room is filled with ambition. Not just ambition, bold ambition. The fierce urgency of now. Facing the greatest challenge there is. But this is my bottom line. This is our bottom line. Africa is doing without 90% of the resources it needs to adapt. And let's not forget, you, Bill Gates, you told us 5 years ago, adaptation is about jobs, is about health, is about innovation. Adaptation, you said, is the growth story of the 21st century, but we're not capitalizing on this opportunity yet. In a world we know plagued with multiple crises, the question is this: how can we manage to double down on adaptation? Let me offer 3 solutions. 1, in Glasgow 2 years ago, we all committed on a doubling of finance flows for adaptation. Countries need to follow the trailblazers in this room to double down on that as well and make good on these pledges. African leaders, and we will be joined soon by the President of Senegal, the President of Kenya, the President of Tanzania, and the President of Comoros, they have come here with their compacts, AAAP compacts. What is that? An investment roadmap on adaptation. They are committing, and they offer great investment opportunities for all of us. The fierce urgency of now. Second, the private sector is MIA in Africa on adaptation. MIA, missing in action. This has to change. And I'm here to tell you that it can. We have to break the next frontier to bring the private sector in. Because, President Adesina, if private finance can be 40% of adaptation flows in Asia, it definitely should be 40% and not 10 of today in Africa. The fierce urgency of now. And my third message, access and innovation in finance. Countries, of course, need access. Communities need access. And we have to innovate. Adaptation cannot add more debt to debt-stressed economies. We need debt swaps not debt traps. The fierce urgency of now. But the good news is this: we can do all these things. You know why? Because we already are, but not at the speed and scale required. And that is why we're here today. Because it takes what? It takes leadership. And what leadership, ladies and gentlemen, we have here with us today in this room. Starting with my big brother, my close friend, the driving force behind Africa as a climate-resilient powerhouse, President Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Your Excellency is the Prime Minister of Netherlands, my dear brother, Prime Minister Ruto, my dear friend, Bill Gates, who does so much for our world, the Right Honourable David Cameron, the former UK Prime Minister, who is now UK's Secretary of State, and you talk about adaptation. When I saw you take the job, I said, this is real adaptation. Give it up to him. It's a good thing. He's committed to that. And I see my friend and the minister from Norway and several other honorable ministers that are here, global leaders, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I wish to thank you for finding time to attend our event today. On September 4th, 2023, Africa and the world gathered in Nairobi, Kenya, for the Africa Climate Summit hosted by President William Ruto and the African Union. It was a landmark event, where Africa spoke with one voice, the African voice. That African voice reverberated globally about Africa's challenges and needs on climate change. Africa, which accounts for only 3% of cumulative emissions, suffers disproportionately from its devastating effects. The latest Climate Vulnerability Index shows that 9 out of 10 most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change are in sub-Saharan Africa. Africa is simply choking from climate change. It loses $7 to $15 billion annually due to climate change, and that is projected to rise to $50 billion by 2050. However, Africa receives just 4.5% of the global climate finance. And access to financing for adaptation is even more challenging, with the continent receiving $11 billion for climate adaptation when in fact its needs are 10 times more. The global call for doubling on climate adaptation is absolutely timely. Now we must turn that into action. Africa can no longer wait. The African Development Bank is responding strongly to climate adaptation needs of Africa. We now devote 63% of our total climate finance to adaptation, the highest share among all multilateral development banks globally. The African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize $25 billion for climate adaptation in Africa, the largest climate adaptation program, as you heard for Patrick, in the world. We are doubling down on climate adaptation for least developed countries through the climate action window of the African Development Fund, and many of our funders are here today. The climate action window received $429 million from the government of the United Kingdom. Thank you very much for being here, Secretary of State. Netherlands, Prime Minister, the government of Germany and Switzerland, and several other more will soon be joining us. We plan to mobilize up to $14 billion for climate action window to support climate adaptation for Africa across 37 low-income countries. I am very pleased, therefore, to announce here today that the operationalization of the climate action window starts right here and right now at this COP as we launch the first call for proposals this week. Thank you. And today I request from all donors and foundations to join the climate action window, and I'm particularly delighted that my dear friend Bill Gates is here. And Bill, the window is open, and I'm sure that you're going to come through the door and make sure that it gets well funded. Together, let us deliver climate-resilient agricultural technologies for 20 million farmers, deliver weather insurance for 20 million farmers, rehabilitate 1 million hectares of degraded lands, provide water, sanitation, and health for 18 million people, and renewable energy for close to 10 million people. To deploy climate adaptation resources more effectively, the African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation have supported the development of what we call country adaptation compacts in 8 countries: Senegal, Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, Mozambique, Equatorial Guinea, and Algeria. The development of country climate adaptation compacts is ongoing in Liberia, South Africa, Cabo Verde, Morocco, and the Republic of Benin. These country adaptation compacts will allow investors in climate adaptation at country levels to know exactly what they are supporting, the flows of financing, and the deliverables on climate adaptation. I'm therefore delighted that the Excellencies, heads of state and government will be joining us later as we go along to speak about their adaptation compacts here today. Their leadership and advocacy will be critical to drive climate adaptation solutions, accountability, and resource flows for African Adaptation Acceleration Program, which will then support these national climate adaptation compacts. As I close, let me say, as part of our commitment, the African Development Bank will also launch here this week the Africa Climate Risk Insurance for Adaptation, otherwise called ACRIFA, a $1 billion facility that will help to insure countries against extreme weather patterns. Together, let us build buffers for Africa against climate change. Together, let us double down for a climate-resilient Africa. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, President Adesina, again, for being so bold and forward-leaning. And as always, when you come here in these events, you push the boundaries, and that's exactly what we need to do indeed. The next speaker on the list is not just a speaker, it's the pioneered agricultural innovation to fight climate change. And the next speaker is also the founding father of the Global Center on Adaptation. I mean, the mastermind behind this whole agenda. Mr. Bill Gates, you have the floor, sir.
Well, in the world of climate, in many ways, adaptation is the orphan child compared to mitigation. Mitigation is incredibly important. The scale of the problem we have to adapt to will be determined by the speed that we can mitigate. And so in no way would I take away from the urgency of the funding and innovation and scale out. And most of the COP will focus on mitigation. But this is the headline adaptation event. And so I'm pleased our first 2 speakers are energizing all of us to tell this story of adaptation. In fact, my personal engagement with climate started because I was spending time in Africa talking to farmers about the challenges they faced. And as they talked about the years when their crops would fail, they said that was happening to them more often. And of course, the effects of that are quite dire. These are farmers who don't have a large savings account to tide them over during that year. They don't have a buffer stock. And so the impact of a bad harvest is malnutrition. It's immiseration. And we all know that malnutrition is a scourge. In fact, over 2/3 of the kids who die from various diseases would have survived if they'd been fully nourished. And so malnourishment is a factor in the majority of developing world deaths. And so it's through this vector that the deep inequity of climate change takes place. And so when I left Africa, I went back and asked my scientific friends to start me on a process of understanding climate. How clear was the science? What were the impacts? And how far along were we in creating solutions? And of course, for everything, I believe innovation gives us a path to get there sooner, to get there at a reasonable cost. And so both in mitigation and adaptation, innovation is going to be very important. Now, when we hear all these challenges, it's easy to feel like, do we ever solve these problems? And so I want to give two examples where the world came together and fantastic solutions resulted. First would be in global health. At the turn of the century, many people realized that we had vaccines that could save lives, and they were getting to the rich countries, but not to the children who needed the most. And a great number of leaders decided to support that endeavor. David Cameron was a strong supporter. UK is the biggest funder of that effort. But it's not the funding that's exciting. What's exciting is what resulted. And over the next 15 years after that was created, childhood deaths were cut in half, from over 10 million a year to under 5 million a year. And the major reason for that was that those new vaccines, rotavirus, pneumococcus, pentavalent, were getting to the world's children and making a huge difference. And that's just a great example. New vaccines were created, new techniques to make them at very low cost, new ways to communicate, and the world came together, and that it's such a triumph, I don't think we can celebrate it enough. Turning now to the area of climate, what is the toll of climate? When we think about the victim of climate, what should we have in our mind? Of course, there are weather disasters. There's sea level rise, tsunamis, but the vast majority of suffering from climate change comes from farmers, smallholder farmers, who will experience these terrible years where their yields are often greatly reduced or even completely eliminated altogether. And that's what we should have in mind. The world faced a food crisis back in the 1960s and 70s. In fact, because of population growth, particularly in Asia, there was this deep concern that we would face increased starvation. And the good news on that is that because of the Green Revolution, where crop productivity was increased, that was avoided. In fact, calories per person went up in those years. And so it is possible to raise farming productivity. It is possible to help these farmers in many ways. Improve seeds that can deal with drought, can deal with higher temperatures. That's not all we need to do with the farmers. We need to get them the best weather forecast. We need to get them the best advice. We need to get them credit so that advanced seeds and fertilizer can be used as inputs. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to double productivity in the key countries, including South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. By providing better inputs, we can make that doubling, which means that even in the face of population growth and climate change, we can improve nutrition and reduce the dependency to be food importers. The CG system is not well known, but that's the group, CGIR is the full acronym. That's the group that does seed innovation. And so I would say one clear imperative as we move forward on this adaptation agenda is fully funding their work. If they're able, over the next 3 years, to have resources of $4 billion, they'll be able to get improved seeds to over 500 million farmers. And of course, that benefits billions of people. That's not the only thing we need to do in adaptation. There's many things, but I would say the majority of what we need to do is in that space. This is like vaccines. We can innovate, we can measure the impact, and we can make sure climate is not the thing that delays development. After all, as a country develops, as you get more shelters, you get more savings, all the economic models about climate surprise people that in the rich countries they don't show dramatic effects. Where they show the very dramatic effects is on the countries that don't yet have the resiliency. So whether it's just common sense or basic human morality, making sure that additional dollars, not shifting away from education or health or things that are very important, but we need additional dollars for climate adaptation. We're falling short, whether it's in this agriculture area or the other areas as well. And so I'd encourage everyone here to go out and carry this message. There's an exciting opportunity here, and it's an opportunity driven by an equity agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill Gates, by focusing on not just the possible, but also making the possible probable. And specifically mentioning the CGIAR, difficult acronym, but super important. And we as GCR are delighted to announce also later today a joint partnership with the CG system in this regard as well. The next, indeed, that's an applause worthwhile. The next speaker is an interesting man. He's the longest-serving European leader of our time, leader of a nation, 1/3 underwater, my nation indeed as well. It is thanks to him that the world knows that adaptation is possible. Prime Minister Rutte, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, Patrick, actually it's Viktor Orban who is the longest-serving European leader, but I'm happy to take that role. Thank you so much, dear Patrick, and also the previous speakers. David Cameron is sitting here. He is back, and now I know what my next job will be. So good to see you again. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is great that we meet here today, that we join here at this important meeting, because it is our common goal to scale up investments in climate adaptation in Africa. That's what we collectively need to achieve. Because climate adaptation can bring also significant investment opportunities, as is also clearly stated during the Africa Climate Summit by President William Ruto. And public finance needs to help to unlock that potential. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are honored in the Netherlands, we honor the Glasgow commitments to double adaptation finance by 2025. And here, first of all, I would like to urge other countries to step up efforts on adaptation finance. Last year, we announced that the Netherlands supports the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program with 110 million euros. And this year, I'm proud to see this program being implemented, because action speaks louder than words. Action builds trust. Our support to Africa extends also to our 50 million euro commitment to the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the IFAD. And this is about replenishment. And we contribute 30 million euros to the Vision Adapted Crops and Soil. And this is the VAX. This is an initiative to develop climate resilient crops and healthy soils. For example, the Netherlands is working with Ethiopia to make this happen. Effective climate adaptation requires both finance, but also it is about a better implementation, what we do at a national level. So this has to do with national policy planning. And therefore, managing floods, managing drought and water pollution must be the key element, I believe, of every national budget and of every national adaptation strategy. Dear friends, the message is clear. Europe, the Netherlands, we want to be your allies. Africa can count, has to count, and will count on us as your adaptation partners. Thank you so much.
And indeed, Prime Minister Rutte, you may not be the longest serving European leader, but for sure you are the longest Prime Minister of the Netherlands, indeed, since the Second World War. And about your next job, we do hope that you will stay actively involved in climate adaptation going forward. Our next speaker just came in from the National Plenary. He needs to make a statement. He needs to go back. So I want to give him the floor as well. President Assoumani. You lead Africa today. At this COP, what is success for Africa? What should be delivered here? Mr. President.
Merci beaucoup. Comme vous l'avez dit tous, le temps doit être consacré aux actes, mais pas aux paroles, donc je vais être très bref. Excellences, chers collègues, je suis très heureux de me joindre à vous, au nom de l'Union africaine, pour m'exprimer sur un sujet d'une importance capitale pour notre avenir à tous, à savoir notre adaptation au changement climatique. Mais avant d'entrer dans le vif du sujet, je voudrais remercier mes frères, le président William Ruto et le président Macky Sall pour l'organisation de cette rencontre. Mes remerciements vont également à l'endroit de la Commission de l'Union africaine, la Banque africaine de développement et le Centre mondial pour l'adaptation pour la mise en place de cette plateforme. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, l'année 2023 a été une année très difficile en matière d'aléas climatiques. En l'occurrence, les tempêtes, les inondations, la sécheresse et les vagues de chaleur, des aléas qui touchent de plein fouet nos populations, premières victimes de l'impact climatique. La capacité de nos populations, de nos pays et de notre continent à s'adapter à l'impact climatique constitue donc un enjeu majeur pour l'avenir de nos générations. Aussi, nous n'avons plus le choix, nous devons agir sans plus attendre. Cependant, notre capacité à nous adapter dépendra aussi de notre capacité à mobiliser les fonds nécessaires pour la mise en place de mécanismes beaucoup plus innovants en vue d'atteindre l'échelle d'investissement nécessaire. Or, l'Afrique demeure encore loin du compte s'agissant du financement international, de l'adaptation, et la situation ne peut plus demeurer ainsi car l'insuffisance d'investissement et le manque de planification en matière d'adaptation au changement climatique risquent de compromettre l'avenir de notre continent. Honorable assistance, Mesdames et Messieurs, la lutte contre le changement climatique sera coûteuse et peu de nos pays africains disposent de ressources budgétaires nécessaires pour relever ce grand défi. Selon une étude de FMI datant d'avril 2023, l'Afrique a besoin de 50 milliards de dollars par an d'ici 2050 pour financer les mesures d'adaptation. Certes, beaucoup de promesses ont été faites, mais la mise en œuvre est encore trop lente. Ainsi, pour accroître le financement de l'action climatique, nous devons commencer par réformer l'architecture financière mondiale, trouver de nouvelles manières d'associer les financements publics, privés et concessionnels pour accroître l'investissement et combler l'écart entre les besoins du continent et les moyens disponibles. Il nous faudra aussi réformer nos mécanismes d'accessibilité aux fonds pour qu'une fois engagés, ils soient disponibles rapidement et utilisés efficacement. Je viens d'un pays insulaire appelé l'Union des Comores, fortement impacté par les aléas climatiques. Face à la montée des eaux et à l'érosion, nous estimons que l'économie bleue constitue une bonne piste à suivre et à encourager en termes d'opportunités d'investissement innovants. Ainsi, avec nos partenaires, nous devons renouveler et renforcer les engagements pris pour doubler les flux financiers en faveur de l'adaptation d'ici 2025. Nous devons soutenir nos efforts avec nos plans nationaux d'adaptation et nos pactes d'adaptation et intensifier les efforts pour rationaliser l'accès au financement international pour le climat. Je salue les avancées obtenues hier sur l'accord retrouvé relatif à l'opération de fonds sur les pertes et dommages, ce qui suscite beaucoup d'espoir quant aux autres financements, bien entendu. Cet ensemble éclate, mesdames et messieurs, à travers une solidarité internationale réellement inclusive que nous réussirons à assurer à nos pays un futur résilient. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for your bold statement, also for leading the African Union this year and clearly stating that adaptation is front and center of the top priorities of the African continent indeed, and that the loss and damage outcome of yesterday was epic, and yes, it was, but it should not become a Pyrrhic victory at the cost of adaptation indeed. Our next speaker, Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron. Welcome back. Your government, indeed, is putting your money where your mouth is on adaptation in Africa. So, Foreign Secretary, what could this COP deliver for Africa on adaptation?
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for letting me take part today. I was very proud to be a Prime Minister at the Paris COP, and I'm proud to be here as Foreign Secretary at the Dubai COP. And I hope that this COP is every bit as impactful, every bit as epoch-making as that Paris COP was. And I know I'm biased because he's my king, but I think King Charles made a great speech and launched things so well today. Not just a great king for my country, but a great spokesman for our planet. Now, to solve this problem, we're going to need commitment. We're going to need commitment to working in partnership with Africa. That is something I've always shown. That is why aid reached record levels under my government, why investment, why trade, why joint problem solving, why the introduction of green finance, all those things happened. And I'm as committed today to working in partnership with African countries as I was then. But it also requires commitment to this issue of adaptation. And Bill Gates put it so well. It's sometimes been seen as the poor relation, as the orphan child of mitigation. But in Africa today, it's not about what might be necessary in the future. It's about what's necessary now. Crops are failing now. Soil is being ruined now. Populations are moving now. Farmers are struggling now. Water is short now. That's why adaptation is so essential, and that's why this part of COP is so important. Now, alongside commitment, it requires cash. I pay tribute to my colleague, Mark Rutte, not only one of the longest-serving prime ministers in Europe, but also one of the tallest and one of the best. I pay tribute to him because he has fulfilled what was promised at Glasgow in terms of doubling the money going into adaptation. The United Kingdom is going further. We were spending £500 million in 2019, and by 2025 we will be spending £1.5 billion on adaptation. That is money that will go 200 million to the African Development Bank, 20 million to the Africa Acceleration Adaptation Partnership, the AAAP. And that is money that will go into vital schemes like the one that links climate information so that farmers can see the difficult weather conditions that are coming. But as well as this cash and this commitment, I think there are three other points that I hope people can take into account. When you're Prime Minister, you have no time to think. When you stop being Prime Minister, you have plenty of time to think, and these are reflected in some of the thoughts that I've had. The first is scale. I will always argue for aid. I think it is essential in our world that rich countries see it as a moral mission, and that is why it's so important. But we know it is never going to be enough. If we're going to scale up, we've got to use all the resources at our disposal. And today we are leaving money on the table because the multilateral development banks that do a brilliant job, if we expanded their balance sheet, if we change some of the rules, there is a 400 billion benefit of extra money that can be invested in places around Africa, around the world, to deal with issues like adaptation. It's already happening. 40 billion has been released from the World Bank, but with a real effort, every multilateral development bank can do better. So foreign secretaries and prime ministers need to talk to their finance ministers and need to work with those multilateral development banks to put that cash on the table. That's one, scale. Two is method. I'm a big supporter of aid. I proved that as Prime Minister. But we have to change the way that we do development. It's no longer any good just to turn up and try and have some donor-recipient relationship. On too many occasions, aid and assistance has been something that has been done to other countries rather than with other countries. We know what it's like. We have these conferences, we come up with a set of targets, we come up with a set of proposals, and then we hand them down like tablets of stone for other countries to follow. That doesn't work. It just sets them up to fail. Instead, what we've got to be doing is working with countries, asking them what is their vision for the adaptation they need. What's the pathway they want to take? What mixture of technology do they want to use to have a greener future, and help them to deliver that narrative, that story for their government to tell their people, so people can feel it's my plan, it's an African plan, it's not a handed down plan, and it's a plan that we want to see happen. Third point, and I think this is absolutely vital, simplicity of implementation. I've only been at this COP for about 48 hours, and I've already lost count of the times that countries and their representatives have said to me, the money you say is available, the programs you set up, I find it impossible to get hold of the money and spend it on the schemes that I need in my country. And we're asking countries often with a limited capacity to access incredibly bureaucratic and complicated sets of money. We've got to make it simpler. I don't want to come back to another COP in another few years and find that lots of great announcements were made, lots of great schemes were put in place, but countries couldn't access and spend the money on the adaptation they need. Those are the three things I would ask that we get right. Scale up, implement it properly, and make sure you do it in partnership, not in a top-down model. These are not impossible things, and the money we need is not impossible. These are doable. So let us get on and do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lord Cameron. Indeed, let's get on with it is the right approach on climate adaptation. And on your third point, Honourable Foreign Secretary, doing it together, right? This partnership approach. Well, actually, that's precisely what the AAAP stands for. That is precisely why we now have these adaptation compacts, which identifies the priorities by the countries themselves. Indeed. Tanzania President Hassan, thank you for joining us today. Thank you also for being the new member of the board of the Global Center on Adaptation. We're very humbled with that indeed. Madam President, you said last September in Nairobi, you said it is about the fierce urgency of now. Your bold adaptation compact, which you launched last September in Nairobi, is the shining light. You have come here to showcase how to transform, as Lord Cameron said, the possible into the real. But you need support. Tell us how. Madam President, the floor is yours.
I thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me first to salute President William Ruto for his leadership on this African initiative that aims at building a more resilient continent. As we are gathering here in Dubai, the message from Africa and other developing countries is clear. We need urgent adaptation action and support. There is a message somewhere I saw. They say action builds hope. So let us create hope for the developing countries. With unfulfilled climate finance pledges, and that we are facing graver climatic-related disasters, it may not be visible in the future to solely rely on public financing. But we have had former Great Britain Prime Minister, Mr. Cameron, saying the needs are now. Everything is happening now, so we need funding now. And this funding may not necessarily come from the public sector, but the private sector is here with us. Let us work together. Excellencies, during the Nairobi Africa Climate Summit, Tanzania supported the African Adaptation Acceleration Program and Compact as a strategic approach to mobilize much-needed adaptation finance. I've been reliably informed that during this COP28, the Global Center for Adaptation will formalize partnership under the AAAP to provide technical support for $700 million in private finance through green bonds issued by 2 Tanzanian commercial banks. So at least Tanzania, we are showing the way on how to generate funds for adaptation and mitigation. In Tanzania, Global Center on Adaptation is working with our partners to bring innovative adaptation solutions for green infrastructure and to design financial instruments to unlock much-needed climate finance. I can confirm that African Adaptation Acceleration Program is working well in our part. I call on your partners to join us, or our partners to join us, with a pledge to move from announcements to actions. This is COP28. We've been hearing announcements in various COPs. So COP28 is for actions. So we stop rhetoric and start acting. Excellencies, Tanzania supports the convening of a meeting of the Ministerial Conference for the Adaptation Finance for Africa in 2024 to further mobilize investments for the Adaptation Acceleration Program in Africa. And Tanzania is ready to join hands and is ready to support whenever, wherever required to make Africa having a proper financing for climate adaptation and mitigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam President. And for all the men here in the room, would we agree that we need more women in leadership positions? Yeah, precisely. Well, we have a female leader here with us today who was driving the AAAP from the beginning. Ann Tvinnerein, Minister of Development of Norway. You put your money where your mouth is. You're one of the largest shareholders together with the United Kingdom. Ann, what do you have to offer for us on this agenda today?
Thank you, Patrick. Excellencies, dear friends and colleagues, it's such an honor to be here and address an issue very important and close to my heart. Norway's partnership with African countries it's strong, it's based on mutual respect, And for me, the core of a mutual, respectful relation is to sit down and listen to each other's priorities. And whenever I speak to African colleagues, whether here at COP or wherever we meet, I hear that adaptation is at the very top of your list of priorities. And yes, mitigation is immensely important, but as Bill Gates put forward, I agree with him. It cannot be treated as the poor cousin of mitigation. I want to put forward one thing as I address you, and that is that as we struggle with the existential threats of climate change, the green transformation is also opening up some new opportunities. And the message from Africa is clear. Africa is part of the answer. African countries have the solutions and the resources to spearhead that transformation. What is needed is investment and technology. And addressing climate change will be very, very costly for all of us. Few countries have the resources and the fiscal space to tackle that challenge. We need to scale up concessional finance to strengthen resilience to climate change and to accelerate that green energy transition. Africa cannot and should not be expected to shoulder that burden alone. Provision of concessional finance and increased climate finance is absolutely essential. Now, my country has been, we will continue to be a reliable partner. We'll continue to provide 1% of our GNI to development cooperation, and we've committed to doubling our climate finance by 2026. And we achieved that target, actually, last year, partly due to the mobilization of private capital through our Climate Investment Fund. We have also committed to tripling the support for adaptation, and delivering on that target is key priority for me. Tomorrow, thank you. And tomorrow, we will announce our contribution to the Loss and Damage Fund. I'm looking forward to that. Adaptation is absolutely essential to build resilience. It will bring major benefits to people, to economies, to lives. Africa's access to climate finance today, it remains tragically low as 5%. And I want you all to hear that Norway is working very actively to simplify processes and procedure to enhance and access that climate finance that is out there. Whenever we have a voice or an impact, that is my message. We must get the funds out there to work for people. And we must ensure that our efforts to tackle climate change does not threaten food security or food production. On the contrary, our efforts must promote sustainable food systems. We have to increase investments in sustainable, climate-resilient, small-scale food production and scale up our efforts to attract private capital across food systems. And we need strong partnerships, people. The evidence base for achieving good adaptation needs to be strengthened, and that is where we need people like Patrick and the GCA. We need to support the integration of climate risk into sectoral and national plans and to work with all relevant stakeholders. Now, Norway considers the GCA to be a very, very key partner in this work. I'm pleased to announce that we have entered into a new 3-year agreement to further strengthen that collaboration. So far, people, we have to face that our collective action has failed to match the scale of this crisis. We need a concerted campaign to strengthen the focus on adaptation in Africa, and Norway stands ready to support. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Madam Minister, for indeed announcing also our new joint partnership under the AAAP indeed. And I said, yes, we do need female leadership, but obviously we also need the other side of the equation, strong male leadership. Well, we just had one coming in. President Macky Sall, President of Senegal, was the chair of the African Union last year, he put the AAAP on the table. And last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, Mr. President, you said, well, we are tired of waiting. We can no longer wait to get moving on this. And that is also why we are so delighted to work with your government on this AAAP Adaptation Compact, because you, sir, you are a global leader. You are not only serve the people of Senegal, you not only serve the people in Africa, you serve the people in the world. So thank you so much. Thank you also for being a board member of GCA. I welcome you here to the stage, President Macky Sall. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'm sorry to come so late, so I was running from room to room. Thank you. Dear colleagues, Madame la Présidente de la République unie de Tanzanie, chères sœurs, Monsieur le Président de la Banque africaine de développement, Monsieur le Secrétaire exécutif de Global Center for Adaptation, Mesdames et Messieurs, cette rencontre en marche de la COP28 vise à mobiliser en urgence les ressources nécessaires au financement de l'adaptation en Afrique. Continent le plus vulnérable au changement climatique, l'Afrique reste en retard sur le processus d'adaptation parce que bénéficiant très peu des financements concessionnels et des investissements verts, malgré l'existence de mécanismes dédiés. En conséquence, les pays africains s'endettent et s'endettent lourdement pour financer leurs projets verts, ce qui constitue une double peine pour le continent qui pollue le moins. L'Afrique ne demande pas une faveur particulière, mais une approche juste et équitable de la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique. Quand nos pays sont appelés à renoncer aux schémas pollueurs que d'autres ont empruntés pendant plusieurs siècles pour mettre la planète dans son état d'urgence actuel, il est juste qu'en contrepartie, le coût de l'adaptation soit simplement équitablement réparti. Nos pays ne doivent pas être condamnés à choisir entre le développement et la protection de l'environnement. Ils doivent faire les deux. Et le bon sens, le bon choix, c'est se développer en protégeant l'environnement. C'est tout le sens de notre plaidoyer pour la mobilisation effective du financement international de l'adaptation aux risques climatiques dans les pays en développement, soit 40 milliards de dollars d'ici 2025, comme convenu à Glasgow. Force est de constater que nous sommes encore loin du compte. Les derniers chiffres montrent en effet que les flux financiers publics internationaux de l'action climatique vers les pays en développement ont chuté de 15% et plafonnent aujourd'hui à 21 milliards en 2021. Il y a donc urgence à mobiliser les ressources annoncées selon les conditions et modalités diligentes et transparentes. En outre, le Sénégal propose d'explorer avec le Fonds monétaire international et les pays partenaires, ainsi que le Centre mondial pour l'adaptation, la possibilité de financer des projets verts par des ressources prévues pour le remboursement de la dette, afin de soutenir la mise en œuvre du programme d'accélération de l'adaptation en Afrique. Je n'oublie pas la question vitale de l'adaptation durable des systèmes agricoles. S'il est pleinement mis en valeur, le potentiel de l'Afrique en ressources foncières et hydriques peut nourrir le continent et aider à nourrir le monde. Et je salue à ce point le programme de la BAD, Nourrir l'Afrique, avec les autres points comme l'énergie, éclairer l'Afrique, etc. L'enjeu, c'est surtout comment faire pour valoriser ce potentiel avec les technologies, le savoir-faire, les équipements et les intrants agricoles adaptés. J'appelle particulièrement à tenir compte des besoins spécifiques des jeunes et des femmes porteurs de projets, sans les soumettre à des procédures et conditionnalités complexes et dissuasives. N'oublions surtout pas que la finalité de notre action, ce sont nos populations, dont les jeunes et les femmes constituent les composantes majeures. Je rappelle enfin pour conclure que l'adaptation de l'agriculture pour la souveraineté alimentaire de l'Afrique a été au cœur du Dakar agricole 2 que le Sénégal a co-organisé avec le groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, et je félicite le président Adesina, avec 72 milliards de dollars qui ont été mobilisés pour la mise en œuvre du Dakar 2 agricole. Et je voudrais naturellement saluer l'engagement de 2 de nos partenaires, 3 même, la ministre de la Norvège, je vois son engagement, mais également nos amis, le président Adesina de la Banque mondiale, de la Banque africaine de développement, et Patrick Verkooijen, directeur général du Centre mondial pour l'adaptation, pour les efforts appréciables qu'ils consacrent à cette problématique majeure de l'adaptation pour l'Afrique. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. You know you have to go to other sessions. First, we've come to the end. I want to thank all of you for coming and honoring our invitation. Clearly, it's because you care, you have a heart and passion and commitment to Africa, and we're very grateful for that. And so what we read here, we heard a lot about commitment, the need to scale things and make sure that things happen very, very, very fast. Bill Gates said it. He said, climate change should not delay development. Absolutely right. David Cameron said that scale matters. Absolutely right. The African Adaptation Acceleration Program is the way to scale that adaptation for Africa. It's the largest climate adaptation program in the world. We had also that partnership matters. We had that we need funding now from President Samia. She said further, let's move from announcement to actions. And I just want to say 2 things about these great leaders that are on stage before they have to go. You know, leadership matters, and leadership not with your head, but leadership with your heart. President Macky Sall and I worked together when we did the Feed Africa Summit, and you were there, and we brought President Samia was there, and we had 34 heads of state and government that actually stayed in investment boardrooms. I've never seen anything like that, for hours, thinking about how they are going to feed their countries. So it was amazing. I've never seen anything. Please give it up to them. It's amazing. And of course, we raised, as President Macky Sall under his outstanding leadership, $72 billion today to implement all those food and agricultural delivery compacts for the countries. So thank you very much for your outstanding leadership, Mr. President. And as I close, my dear sister, President Samia, you know, she's an incredible leader, a passionate leader, a leader who leads with our heart. I said of President Macky Sall that President Macky Sall is a bankable president. I want to say here again, as we lead climate change and deliver climate adaptation compacts for Africa, you heard it from her, that President Samia is a bankable leader. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much, President Adesina. And before you go, Mr. President Macky Sall, I also want to thank the young leaders here in the room, because we need you as well on this journey indeed. Because today reminded us the stark reality. Africa's food off the table, the fierce urgency of now. But Africa, you know it, we know it, is unstoppable, provided we do what? Invest in adaptation indeed. I thank you. This session is closed. Thank you so much.